Good evening. Guten Tag, Talafalava. This is Dr. Snowbrown speaking to you all, especially the Snow Sheep, Snow Shepherds, the Snow King Club congregation. Right. Again, I am still praying. Today I prayed the Katie Sawyer special prayer three times. With a slightly more bold approach, of course, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And in fact, the spirit of death is now what? It is now one of our servants. It's now one of my servants. That's great. That's great. That I command to do jobs for me in my kingdom. Oh dear. Say no more. What do you mean by that? That's great. Well, let me explain to you. My topic for today that I'm going to preach about, again, is the New Zealand police, And the New Zealand police seems to pop up quite a bit. Every time I pray this prayer, Katie Sawyer, the special prayer that I've been telling you, that I've been sharing with you in one of my preachings, one of my videos, and also discussing with you all. What have I discovered? What is the revelation that's been revealed to me through the guardian angel, Sam Lama, Archangel Warren, and the Holy Spirit? Well, again, there are two police officers that are still on the run and are fugitives. That's correct. They could only be fugitives or criminals on the run who committed a heinous crime and many other heinous crimes I've discovered upon my so-called person, upon this meek sovereign head, meek king that you are all witnessing right now, listening to. I know I'm a king, and I think I've explained to you all how I came to be the person that I am before you all, and how my intellectual property came to be the way that it is. That it is actually a kingdom, it's actually a church in the form of a Knights Templar, a meek Knights Templar interactive church kingdom. Now, of course, what kind of king am I? I could only be a natural pastor kind of king, but a king, a sovereign king, very similar to Jesus kind of king. That's correct. So Jesus wasn't an earthly king, as you would expect. That's correct. One that wears a crown, like King Charles III, or King Harold V, or the King of Tonga, or the Mighty King. That's correct. No, Jesus was not that kind of king. But he did have an invisible crown. That's correct. That can only be seen, or that was only seen once he ascended, once he, of course, rose from the grave after 3 days and ascended to the right hand of his Father. And then after 40 days, he then ascended back up in heaven. And you can now see that he does wear a crown. And only because he fulfilled his Father's will and was given all his privileges that he had earned, and also, his crown that made him king, and also Saint Michael, the angel, the most powerful angel in the heavenly realm. So what have I discovered about the New Zealand police? Well, these two police officers would only have to have been associates of this criminal organization that I'll be filing a restraining order against on the 15th of December, next week. That's correct. Which means then every harm that's come my way since the first setup in 1986 with Mr. Prick, or Tavita Lipine, Dr. Tavita Atoa, Dr. Tavita Lipine, who is now possibly part of the elites. all came from that criminal organization. I think the question we need to ask, or I need to ask, is why did the organization want to target this meek noble, or this royal? That's great. Why did that organization, who is made up, majority of Maori descent, their members, and also part Maori and Pākehā descents, that's great. I do not understand why a criminal organization like that, who makes a living out of committing crimes and harming people and targeting vulnerable people and also trying to convert them to their slaves or their so-called sex slaves, would target somebody like me. That is a very good question. I think I have to put it down to the fact that your rallies wanted, especially your cousin side of the family, and those two in Timarua, Mr. and Mrs. Yoke, or Heinz and Atalanta Treveranas, and also other siblings of your daddy. Well, I think what they wanted to do was dominate you, because you're the eldest and the eldest of this so-called special, royal family. That's great. I think they wanted to dominate you. They wanted to control you. They wanted to dictate to your life and your privileges on the level of, that kind of level. What an insult, what an insult. So the way that they could actually get you controlled that way was, to target you through this criminal organization and their wicked, and I mean wicked, associates. That's great. In the form of government officials, members, tenants that are members, that's correct, and also through your rallies. I don't know. I mean, it's such a big, what do you call it? It's such a large group. I mean, it's like everybody, and even your rallies in the form of uncles and aunts that you're supposed to trust, that's correct, and respect, seem to also all had come together unanimously as a whole group with the organization and its members to make the decision to target you, but also to control you, and like a victim or a slave, or like a chattel or some property that they could do what they like. But I mean, at the end of the day, I never gave my consent. I never gave my authorization. I never went targeting, ever wanting to be part of such a demonic, depraved organization, criminal organization. What Christian, let alone what sheep, what shepherd, would want to have anything to do with a bunch of punks like that and ratbags, that's correct, and low-life scumbags and dirtbags like them? You'd have to be sick. You'd have to have lost your marbles. You'd have to be blind as a bat. You'd have to be a fool, for sure. But also, you'd have to be a desperado with low self-esteem, that's correct, and no hope at the same time. Yeah, to become part of that organization. Goodness. Right, the two police officers. Those two are probably the most dangerous. Those two are probably the most dangerous at the moment, because they are constantly dictating to the victims so-called privileges in life as we speak. And it's been going on for over 20 odd years. That's correct. You see how these two police officers, if they are part of the elites, then they would know the police commissioner really well. They would know the Minister of Justice really well. But I think what would make them even more dangerous is if they are actually members of the KKK. That would make it really bad. That's correct. Because then everybody would be afraid to go against these two police officers. That's correct. Because, well, If you're KKK, that's great. What do you suppose is going to happen? If people want to have them arrested, if people want to put them in jailbird, then what will happen is that people will start dropping like flies. That's correct. But I think those two, nobody cares. I don't care about the fact that they might be white in skin color, or that they're Pākehā, or that they're even good looking, or that they might be decent, people, respectable, from respectable families, who have a decent family. That's correct. Who are well known in their communities and are accepted and respected by their communities. I could give an F either if they were Irish. Why? Because I am a sovereign king. That's correct. I'm above them, the scumbags. I'm above their classes in terms of they're the fugitives. They're the rapists. That's correct. You want to compare me to them? They need to be arrested and processed down at the station and sentenced in the courts and also sent to jailbird. They need to now. Because you know what I'm going to do? And I'll be very frank with you guys. If I'm a king and if I know who I am, that's great. Despite I am female and I look indigenous, but I'm actually white on the inside. What do I mean by that? I'm a Pākehā. I'm a straight up Pākehā. My intellectual property is German, Scottish. That's correct. Now, I still have to get a DNA analysis to confirm exactly how much percentage of Pākehā have I got. That's correct. And how much percentage of German or even Scottish that I've got, because I suddenly realized that my daddy, that's correct, who had the last name of Treviranus, whose mother was a Webster, and whose mother's father was a full Pākehā, as in a New Zealand European. That's correct. That is correct. And of course, my granny's mother, who was a Webster, her mother was a half-caste. That's correct. And on the other side of your so-called dad's dad, right, his father was a full German Pākehā. That's correct. And his mother was a half-caste. Samoan, half-caste. That's correct. So that would make my dad a Pākehā. I wouldn't be surprised. That's correct. I wouldn't, because I actually think that the reason why I say that my daddy might have been a king, and the reason why my intellectual property was born this way, is because of the Stuart family. The Stuart family are the only ones who are Scottish that would have had a monarch. That's correct. I'm not sure about the Treviranus family. That looks like they have a seal, all right, that were given by the government of Germany. But I suspect that they were knights. Were Knights Templar. On that side of the family, the Treviranus. Now, they have always been known as part royals there in Germany. But now I actually think my dad was a Scottish king. That's correct. Because of the Stuart family. Now, I don't understand. That's correct. But I'm convinced that I'm actually more probably a German Scottish king. That's correct. A meek Scottish, German Scottish king. That's correct. But I'm more German. Without a doubt. So that's why I don't do things the Samoan way. And I certainly don't do things the Māori way. And I certainly don't do things the English way either. That's correct. I'm definitely German Scottish. So you're looking at a meek sovereign king who is German Scottish. That's correct. Amen. Amen. Well, my dearest mummy, that's great. She's full royal. Well, that's probably why she ended up marrying a German Scottish. a Scottish king. That's correct. My dad, a German Scottish king. That's correct. Remember, it was bound to be that somewhere down the so-called bloodline of the Trevorronis clan, that a sibling was going to be, a monarch. A sibling was going to be born with a monarch. That's correct. Or be born full royal. That's correct. That is to be expected. That is what generally happens. The family of nobility and of royal status who have nobility in their DNA. And that is what I have just discovered. Now, can you imagine now what the two police officers are now doing? It is confirmed that they are definitely KKK MNB associates. They're part of that organization. The problem we're having now at the moment with the victim, I'm still waiting for the information that I've already requested. But it looks like it's possible that the two police officers would fight that decision or that right of mine, and they would try and overrule it or deny it by going through the president of this criminal organization, the MNB, and going through their KKK associate, their so-called rights through those criminal organization, but also their rights as possibly members of the elites. And they would also use your cousin side of the family, if they're part of the elites, to try and dodge the bullet. What do I mean by that? Well, normally, if you're a Paka in this country and you're part of a criminal organization, you would have sex with a member of the elite to deny somebody's request in the system, or deny somebody's privilege, or to control somebody's, access to services, or anything to do with their so-called daily lives and private life and business life in the system. That's correct. And that's what those police officers would do. And that's what my cousin has been doing. So the reason why the police have been ignoring my complaints is because either your cousin's been having sex with people in the system, or with the elites, or whomever's in charge, to deny me that privilege or that right in the system. And they do this a lot when they are members of the elite, or when they are part of a criminal organization, or their members would have had sex with, say, the likes of the sergeant of the police station, or a police officer, or somebody in the system, to deny that privilege of mine. Let's just say that legal right of mine. Like what happened when I went to try and deal with my so-called application for a discharge without conviction. That's correct. The police actually denied you, that's right, that privilege. So I'm guessing it's the same two police officers. It's the same two police officers, that's correct, that would have dictated to the police that were dealing with that pending charge, willful trespass charge, or the prosecutor, that's correct, or they would have gone through the Minister of Justice to do the same, and they would have gone through the lawyer in Oriental Bay, Mr. Anthony Shaw, to also deny this noble here. That's correct, my full privileges. As a noble, and as a meek German Scottish king, that's correct. Now, can you understand now how serious this case is starting to sound? That's correct. You've got two people, these are officials, police officers, but they're not the only ones. You've got members of the organization, criminal organization, and their associates, and the president, that appears to have committed heinous crimes, secret crimes, which the ministers conspired to pervert the course of justice by covering up, because they were denying you your rights to access to information that was going to be used, that's correct, to convict, to prosecute them. Not only that, in the courts of New Zealand, not only that, the minister of so-called in the Crown, minister, well, it might be, looks like Minister of Justice, or some other minister, the fact that, and even the police commissioner, had known about your complaints coming through their system, And they decided just to ignore it and not to do anything about it. Now, when you go and do that, and yet there are many, many complaints out there from other Maoris and other Pākehās and even other Pacific Islanders that have been dealt to, where the police have gone out and arrested the culprits, or they've investigated the matters, or they've accessed the video footages to try and proceed with the prosecution. And here it is in your case. It's like you're completely, there's like blocks everywhere. That's correct. And everybody is being told by somebody to either ignore or to tell her, you know, an excuse of some sort, an alternative or something like that. Now, if that's the way that New Zealand wants to play this, a cat and mouse game, where you're going to deliberately deny my rights, you know, to prosecute people, to arrest people that have committed crimes against my person, where you're going to deliberately, you know, where you are conspiring with the elites and ministers of the government of New Zealand to cover up and deny me, you know, my rights. That's correct. Like the local, you know, Sergeant Candy, where she said that she couldn't screen my digital devices. Why not? Again, it sounds like somebody's dictating to your privileges. What I don't understand is only the frickin' KKK and people in criminal organizations would do that kind of thing, would be that cruel. And deny. That's correct. Normally, you wouldn't do that for normal citizens. But I ain't normal. I am actually a sovereign king. I am actually a noble. That's correct. Can you imagine now why it's turning to the case where I am now going to unpatch every MMB member that I see wearing a patch out there, starting from the 30th of January next year. That will be my goal. As a meek sovereign king. What do I mean by that? If I see an MMB driving past on a motorcycle, you know, those big, heavy Harley, whatever you call them, on Gibbon Street, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run across, that's right, on the road. I'll grab my hammer and I'm going to hit your bike and knock you off your bike. That's correct. And then I'm going to, hammer you. And then I'm going to rip your so-called, patch off you. I'm going to unpatch you right there in the public. But I'm going to teach you a lesson. You know what I mean? That's what I should have done a long time ago with anyone. That's correct. So expect, if you see rocks coming to police cars, it's because I got a right to as a noble sovereign king. That's correct. For fucking committing a crime and thinking you can fucking get away with it. That's correct. You want me to unpatch every police officer out there as well? You want me to do that? You want to see every police car explode after the 30th of January 2023? You want every police station to be burnt down, especially the local one? And the local Mariah to be burnt down? You want that to happen? Right, then you better give me the information that I asked to put on my restraining order, because, my God, it's been going on like this for over 20-odd years. That's correct. And I'm not about to be denied my rights as a New Zealand citizen and my right as a Pākehā as well. Welcome to the real world. That's great. So expect I'm going to be unpatching members. That's correct. Starting next year. That is my goal. As a meek, natural, noble pastor. And it's because that organization, that's right, you guys decided to make me your little playmate. That's correct. To target me. I became a victim. And it was because I let you teach me lessons, torture me. That's great. I mean, I didn't even know that all of this was coming from that stupid red organization with the white demon. That's great. Now it's my turn to unpatch you, discipline you, and give it right back to you. Give you back your rubbish. That's great. In fact, I am thinking of going and assaulting Afatia Baker, my cousin's daddy. That's great. They're giving my cousin a hiding and her husband a hiding as well. They're giving, my cousin's parents a hiding, giving those two in Timarua a hiding, and the rest of dad's siblings are hiding for crossing our boundaries and for using us via that criminal organization. In fact, I'm seriously thinking of going to give the president a hiding as well. There you go. And you think I won't do it? Every people that I serve a trespass notice, I am seriously thinking of giving them a hiding. That's great. And then when I finish giving them a hiding, as a final warning, that's great. But at least that, I'm sure that's going to, if all ia, fika aulilia, o le fia pule, o le makai fale, nga, o le fai me valea, o le moi kolo, that's great. Ma le fia, a me sa fia pule, ma le fia poko, that's great. Masala e fo ia e loa, e le koe fai e le afakia peka. Le kama o lo cousin le makai fale. E le uso lai kiki lo kama. Imkoa kick it up lava. Umai ngā fia, le fia arrogant, ma le wha ama wa lunga. That's great. I said, Longa, that's what you should have done ages ago. Was teach him a lesson. Now you are going to teach them a lesson. Give it, expect rocks going to come your way. Expect I'm going to grab you by the hair and drag you. That's correct. That's my right as a king. I'll tell you this. Back in those days in England, nobles like me, who wore crowns, who were kings and queens, if commoners ever crossed us, that's correct, where you deliberately think it's okay for you to drug us, poison us, torture us, that's right, like the 3 nosebleed that you gave me, and target people like me, when you got no right, if you're a criminal and outlaw, and a rat bag, we just cut your head, we just cut your head off, that's correct. Or impale you. That's correct. That's what that was our right. Back in those days, that's correct. Medieval times, that was our right. As sovereign heads and as kings and queens, with the authority and the backing of our Lord and God, that if such commoners ever crossed us, that's correct, we had a right to have you executed, beheaded. Now you can understand why. When the Nazi soldiers come on the 30th of January, I've given them that date to turn up. That's why it's important for all 20 of them, the 18 people minus the Māori King, I say 19, I think, people that would serve the trespass notice, apart from Constable Stuart Blake, that's great, and so-called, especially the 2 police officers, to have their head severed. So bullet to the head and their heads to be severed. You know why? Because we are a crown. That's the significance. You're not allowed to go against a member of the crown, as in somebody who wears a crown. If you're a tail and you want to go up against a sovereign head, right, it is you would lose your head because you got no right if you're a tail. That's correct. So that's why the nobles had to teach the commoners back in those days about their boundaries and to respect them because they wore crowns. That's correct. And they, they have the authority to rule over nations. But for you people to behave this way, oh my God, it's only because they're a bunch of whores. That's correct. If the ministers and the government of New Zealand weren't a bunch of sex addicts and a bunch of whores, that's great. They wouldn't need to cover up these criminals, let alone protect them. They don't need any protections, for God's sake, if they've committed a crime. And they certainly don't need any lawyers either. That's correct. So what's going to happen now? Especially that the police officers and everybody else are trying to stall, my information to be released. I got every right, that's correct, to give those 2 police officers a hiding. A bloody good hiding. And I bet you, if I'd given my cousin a hiding like I should have done ages ago, that's correct, and also her daddy, I think my family would have been left alone by then. That's correct. There's no doubt. And those two over there in Timborough would have respected you, the eldest, and respected your family. That's great, especially your daddy. Because it looks like this organization and your rallies, especially your cousin's side of the family, did not respect your poor daddy, who was the eldest of 10, that's correct, 10 or 11 siblings, and didn't even have respect for your mother. That's correct. You see what they did to you? They have the audacity. That's great. What disgusting, evil son of a bitches. So now, got it right? What would happen if I and the rest of my 6 siblings come and give each and every one of you a hiding? We got it right too. As nobles. Then you'll see what it means to discipline people on a nobles level when commoners have got no right to think that they can discipline us. That's correct. Who have done nothing to them. And you can't use people like me either for your own selfish, I don't know, evil outcomes. That's correct. It's not on. So how would my cousin feel if I come and give her daddy a fucking good hiding? And unpatch him right there. That's correct, inside his own home. Because that would be my right. Because somebody in that family should have given the so-called old, the son of a bitch, a good hiding. Because that's just what these adults and these people needed. That's correct. Because we'll fa'a mawalunga. We'll fe ba'u. O wa ba'u muku so. That's correct. Right. The 2 police officers, you better hand yourself down at the station. Confess your crimes. And the rest of you, you better follow through. Because the Nazi told us, I now have a right to command. The government of Germany, that's correct, to deploy 1,000 Nazi soldiers to put out, to bury these son of a bitches. That's correct. Because they are too much. They got the bloody nerve. That's correct. And none of you deserves to enter my kingdom either. The kingdom is going to stay closed. Private now. You know, the Catholic Church might be a monarch, but that's open to the public. But this kingdom is private, and monarch is private now. For all the right reasons. You people you don't need to enter my kingdom at all. That's correct. And you don't need to come near me either. And as for your drugging and poisoning, that needs to stop. But the dictatorship, you need to shove that dictatorship where it belongs, among your slaves and your scumbags. Time to wake up. That's great. Go, careful. You also, my siblings, hello, dad. Don't. You know, the sad thing is I'd hate to think that my cousin may have had sex with the 2 police officers, or one of them, that got me, that's right, that got me raped at the police station during a lockup on the 24th of June, 2003. You know, the other thing that I would hate to think that she might have also had sex with all of my dad's brothers to make them stupid, to accept incest and to cover it up. Because that would actually clearly indicate to me that your dad's siblings are all sick with incest. Now, that is just evil. Now, that's really evil. And I'm now convinced that after Tia Baker, that my cousin's family are all sick with incest. That's correct. But that organization, you guys, you better get the hell out of my so-called private life, from my cell phone, any digital devices. You guys better move on. That's correct. Get the hell out. And don't ever enter my second sister's home down there in Lower Hutt. And don't ever bother, don't you ever dictate to my brother and his family up in Rotorua. Don't you dare ever, and I'm talking about the people of Aotearoa, every dumb Maori out there. You might have signed a treaty partnership. 3 document, but you people, you are commoners and a bunch of nobodies and a bunch of nothing. You got no right to access my kingdom unlawfully, and you got no right to know about my business and what I say inside here in my flat. And you got no right to come entering my private flat here, right? This sacred space, yeah. Come here, invade to be nosy, to do whatever it is. I don't want some stupid Maoris to come inside my flat and carry out their so-called prayers and rituals and blessings that I never consent to. Rude! Don't you dare do that! You are not welcome in my kingdom, that's correct. And for that, I curse you, that's correct. If you're a bully, I don't want any Maoris to be part of my kingdom. Because you are rude and arrogant. But go ke whama walunga ale fia pule e makau kia. Go ke le pule ina mako ainga. Same for that organization. Afatia Peka and your family, you should have talked out that year. You should have told that organization, my family is off limits. We are part stewards. So we know who we are. All my 6 siblings are happily married. That means they are faithful. They're faithful in their marriages, and they must be faithful to God as well. They sure are, except for that side of the family, and I think it's the Webster. Now, this one is for the bloody fucking Websters. You watch your step now. Don't you dare ever dictate to my privileges or my life, or ever harm any of my immediate family. Don't you dare. I know very well what the Webster were like. Towards my dad, that's correct. That's why my dad seemed to always be targeted. Because his younger siblings were jealous of him, but the Webster were far worse because they were part of that organization. Webster, well, umaoko, finish. Out. Well, sange ko kala about our family. The same with dad's siblings. Oko, wafafo. Go makai fale mo kolo out. Moko ko luanga esele pau mo moku. Le cousin la oi. Go fais fakau. Aselo am kwa fasi lava. O ngama lama lola ia e pule mako, ile mako e ile pule. Ile authority of your nobles for the disciplined commanders. Especially rat bags. Right. Name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen.